live also in Johannesburg at Gallagher Estate at the DA's Federal Congress electing new leadership. The 2,000 delegates will go out for about 25 minutes now, but we continue our discussion here to unpack what the Democratic Alliance says it wants to see as unity within its party, also grow the official opposition of the country. Siviwe Gwarube, who is the chief whip of the Democratic Alliance, joins me now. Ms. Gwarube, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Quite a number of mentions in the resolutions as well as the constitutional amendments on coalitions. That's been a hot topic, given the chaos that we have seen in Tshwane, recently now at Ekurhuleni, as well as the city of Johannesburg. A number of bills have been brought before Parliament, which you say will sort of stabilize how coalitions proceed going forward. Is that enough, though, to deal with what I would certainly term selfish political interests that have trumped the advancement of service delivery?
Griselda, I think firstly, I think the biggest people who are mostly adversely affected by the instability that we are seeing at a local level are the citizens, and they are the residents. And ultimately, they're the biggest losers. When politicians are fighting, they are the ones who are left without the crucial service delivery. The chaos and the instability we've seen in the city of Johannesburg in Ekurhuleni is deeply unfortunate. It's something, as a Democratic Alliance, while we did not get a huge enough chunk of votes in 2021, we still wanted to be part of a coalition government because we were of the belief that voters would at least want us to try. Of course, the politics of the checkbook politics reared its ugly head, and of course there were lots of harsh lessons. We too had to learn how to manage coalitions. What are some of the pitfalls of a 10-party coalition, and whether or not these can work. And so really the idea behind bringing legislation before Parliament is to say, well, Parliament can't just be a bystander when these metros are in chaos and people are actually suffering service delivery. We are lawmakers, and as legislators, it's incumbent upon us to be forward-looking. What happens in an event when we're in a national coalition government? How do we deal with that? Do we have the legislative framework for that?
And it seems that if we look at what the federal chairperson said, Dr. Ivan Meyer, have you, as the Democratic Alliance, resigned yourself to that? Because he did say a coalition government in the union buildings. Are you saying, as the Democratic Alliance, a few months or even less than a year to the next election, that 50 plus is not within reach?
Look, we're definitely saying that what we want to do is to bring the ANC below 50%. Griselda, their own polling is saying, well, different polling is saying they're polling under 50% and have been consistently, right? And if their own polling leaked a couple of months ago, that suggests that they're polling under 40%. Now, if you do the numbers, the reality is that every single opposition party, in order for us to get to that 50+1 stable coalition, we're going to have to grow. Even ourselves at the Democratic Alliance, the people who are elected here tomorrow are going to have to understand that the losses, the loss we suffered in 2019 cannot be replicated in 2024. They're going to have to understand that we're going to have to share to increase our vote of our share of the vote from 20.7 in 2019 way higher, so that at the very least we can have a stronger voice at the table. So yes, the research we are seeing, our own internal polling is suggesting to us that we may not see an ANC majority in 2024.
Well, just for our viewers as well, you could also stream these proceedings over the Congress, which is currently underway here at Gallagher Estate on SABC+. So many platforms where you'll be able to watch, and whether you're not at home, the many platforms the SABC is providing so that you are able to watch what is unfolding here. You speak about the losses in 2019 that cannot be replicated, and that can only but look at one of the resolutions. The Democratic Alliance wanting a judicial inquiry into farm murders. Now, if you recall, in 2019, you lost votes significantly to the Freedom Front Plus and Good Party of what we could term as the conservative white vote. Is this now, some months prior to the election, less than a year to the election, a way to woo those, one of the ways to woo back those voters?
Look, Honestly, yes, we lost votes.
Thank you for your honesty.
Of course, of course. We lost votes. I mean, from going from a 22% party to going to a 20.7 party, that was a huge loss. And it was the very first time the Democratic Alliance ever had an electoral loss. That it needed us to have an introspection as an organization as to what went wrong. A number of things. We had you'll remember, an entire investigation to what went wrong and the like. But we've seen over the by-elections, Griselda, that we have had over the past year and a bit, that we are clawing back some of that support. And of course, we lost votes across, whether it is the Afrikaans vote or whether it is colored South Africans or whatever the case may be. And there isn't a concerted effort to say we are flirting particularly with the particular segment of the vote, and therefore we want to be seen to be championing their issues. This is something, rural safety has been something that has been a big part of the DA's safety plan in general. So we're not going to necessarily pick out segments of the voters to say, look at us, we care about your issues. Because you see, Griselda, the reality is that if 32%, and our research shows 32% of our support base are Black South Africans, 30% of our supporters are white South Africans, 7% are Indian, and I think 31% are colored people. And so we're the only political party that does not have the luxury of segmenting people according to race and according to the issues. We've got to go to the nub of the issue. Where are people feeling the pinch? Cost of living. People are feeling the pinch to safety, whether you live in an affluent area or not. Those are the things we've got to do to essentially grow our share of the vote.
You're one of the few Black leaders of the Democratic Alliance. I mean, Salim Simanga, Jane Sithole is part of senior leadership within the Democratic Alliance, but you can't shy away from the fact that South Africans are watching and concerned about. I mean, Bongani Baloyi has just left. You had Herman Mashaba who also left. You had Musi Maimane who had also left, and they've got nothing decent to say after they leave the Democratic Alliance. What do you say to the potential voter that you're trying to appeal to who will be Black and say that Black senior leadership within the Democratic Alliance is leaving? That's a vote of no confidence in the party that they once belonged to.
I think the answer can be answered in a twofold. Number one, I think it's important that we never strip away those individuals of their agency. If they one day wake up and say the Democratic Alliance is no longer the party that I want to have or follow, I want to go start my own political party, like we've seen Bongani Baloyi has done, we've seen Musi Maimane has also done, we've got to give people that agency. However, where it is important for the party is to say we've got to introspect when people say whether or not we're not involved in the policy making process, can that be widened more so that we can see ourselves reflected? Then we've got to introspect, like we did with we had that policy conference we had about 2 years ago. Because Griselda, the reality is that political parties are imperfect. They're made of human beings. But it's important, if you're the official opposition, to have a retention strategy. You don't want to lose those people.
But that's not happening. And we're not just talking about, not to sound condescending, the rank and file of the Democratic Alliance. These are senior people within the Democratic Alliance, credible. They've got institutional memory of the. You can't just dismiss that. You have to introspect. And is that happening within the Democratic Alliance? It is.
It is. And I mean, and it's not a dismissal at all. And that's why I started off by saying I don't want to discredit the agency, because these are people, these are good friends of ours who have since decided to do something else with their lives. And so we've also got to give that credit to that, right? But what I'm saying is, as a party, my responsibility as a senior leader in the party is to say, Democrats, how is it that we are changing the culture to make people make sure that people are feeling like they belong, to make sure that our policies are reflective of the people that are in the organization? That's something we've got to do. That's something we've had to do. I mean, what happened in 2019 2018 is something no political party can actually survive it if it happens repeatedly. It's a harsh lesson, Griselda. It's a harsh lesson we've had to learn, and we've been racked on the knuckles for it. We've had to learn from it, and we've had to grow from it. And so for me, I'm satisfied that enough of the difficult conversations within the DA are happening. We are asking ourselves the difficult questions, and we can only hope to do that, because then once we start asking, why has this happened? Why have we lost votes here? Then only then can we fix it. But if we have a sort of an in denial kind of attitude of there's nothing here, nothing to see here, then we're never going to fix it. So I'm certainly one of the people who say, well, let's hold on. What has gone wrong? Why has somebody decided they no longer feel as though they belong in the organization? Have we gone after them and said, hey, can we have a discussion outside of the cameras? Let's have a frank discussion about where in the organization do you feel alienated? And of course, if someone says, look, I want to start my own political party, I want to do something else. Mbali Ntuli, a good friend of mine, has said, look, politics no longer is the vehicle that I think is needed for people to see the change. She's gone to start a grassroots level organization. So these things are complex, but where we have to be honest as political parties is where we introspect and look each other in the eye and say, well, this is where we've gone wrong. These are the mistakes we've made. Similarly to the handling of coalitions, there are harsh lessons as a DA we too have had to learn.
You also can't divorce yourself from that chaos, I guess, as the Democratic Alliance. You have to take some kind of accountability, because you were given a chance in these areas. And the people of those areas, let me just speak about a stone's throw away from here. Hammanskraal is one of the areas where communities felt like they were not heard. In other areas in Ekurhuleni, where communities felt that they were not heard. So being given the chance, how do you also, as the Democratic Alliance, you are the official opposition, parliamentary opposition, how do you tailor yourselves then ahead of, and my conversation is very much tailored around where we're headed to, which is the election in less than a year's time. How do you say to the voter, look at us beyond just coalition politics and how we got there, in that we have to, get into bed with other political parties in order, but to see the Democratic Alliance as more than that, that you are able to gain national power or even govern at that level for that matter.
Yeah, and look, and one of the key lessons, as I talked about, the difficulty and the harsh lessons we learned, was that coalitions made of various partners, where you have 10 or more political parties, are almost impossible to maintain, because you've got 10 different political agendas, you've got 10 different political parties, and politicians are really not the easiest people to work with. However, once, in my view, the reason why I have sought to introduce this legislation is to say, perhaps if we start operating in a legal framework that is law in South Africa, that's when we can have a safeguard for the people of South Africa. Yes, of course, maturity is needed, political maturity in those parties is needed, but surely we can start to look at international best practice. Some countries have introduced a threshold. Some countries in Kenya say that their coalition agreements are made public and they are binding. All of these things are things we can put in place so that we too can start to see a more stable coalition government. Because you see, Griselda, it's not good for us either to be embroiled in unstable coalition governments. And we put ourselves in that situation because we couldn't say to the voters, it's going to be too difficult, we're not going to try. But we've learned harsh lessons, and that's why I'm saying we've got to look at it on various levels.